Hi, this is Gus Philpott, recording today in Columbia, South Carolina, where it is Friday, May 19th, 2017, and thinking today about a wonderful story from my days back in high school when I had a part-time job driving a tow truck in Clayton, Missouri. One nice summer day, the boss sent me in the tow truck to make a 100-mile trip to Waynesville, Missouri. Now, that made all the other employees mad, of course, because the kid, the part-time kid, got a gravy day behind the wheel in the tow truck without having to do any work, like dirty work. So I hopped in the truck, drove down to Waynesville. I believe it was Highway 55 at the time. I think that was before interstate, although it was a four-lane divided highway. One of the things that happened was on the way, I met oncoming traffic on my side of the divided highway. So I got in the middle of the road with the tow truck and flashed the headlights. That didn't do any good. I turned on the yellow overhead lights and moved over into the inside lane, and that made the oncoming driver a little perturbed. And he pulled off on his right-hand shoulder. I pulled off on my left-hand shoulder, and we met bumper to bumper. And this old man piled out of his car, and he was ready to take me apart. I attempted to persuade him that he was going the wrong way and about to cause a head-on crash. His wife is tugging on him, trying to get him back in the car. He finally agreed to turn around, and about a mile down the road, he turned left into a cut-through to the traffic on the other side of the trees and disappeared out of sight. I proceeded on to Waynesville, found the car I was supposed to tow back. It was an old Chevy full of tires on wheels, which confused me a little bit, and I hooked it up and began to tow it. I only went about a block, and the car I was towing had a flat tire, so I changed that, towed it another block. It had another flat tire, and I was finally beginning to understand why it was so full of tires on wheels. That way I had plenty of spares. By the time I got to the edge of town, I looked in the mirrors, and there behind me was a Colorado State patrolman with his lights on and two tow trucks behind him. Well, he stopped me and explained that the tow truck I was driving had the wrong license plate on it, good for only 25 miles, and there I was 100 miles from home, which of course had made the local tow truck drivers mad because the kid from St. Louis was getting a nice tow, expensive, out of their town and back to St. Louis. Business they could have had. Well, the trooper wrote me a ticket and I went on my way. When I got back to the station, I explained to the boss what had happened. He called a friend of his, a local Missouri Highway State patrolman, and that patrolman explained that the judge in that town, Waynesville, was a hanging judge, and the boss better give me a lot of money when I went back for court. So 3 weeks later, the boss gave me $250. I jumped in my own car and drove down to Waynesville, Missouri, found the courthouse, went in, sat down, and about that time, an old man came in and sat down next to me, old geezer, had on bib coveralls, plaid shirt and everything. He asked me what I'd done. I told him the whole story. He asked if I was guilty. I said, yes, sir, I was guilty. I didn't know the law, but that's no excuse. Did you bring any money, kid? Yes, sir. Heard they have a hanging judge in this town, so I brought $250 with me. We talked a few minutes more. 1 minute to 9, he stood up. We shook hands. He went on his way. I thought he'd probably leave the courtroom and go downstairs, grab the broom, and start sweeping up. Instead, he stepped forward toward the bench, pushed the gate open, stepped in, and went up and sat down behind the bench. Guess who he was? The judge. Well, they started court. The judge pointed down at me. Call that kid first. The bailiff called me up. The judge asked me how I pleaded, and I said, well, you already heard the story once. You probably don't want to hear it again, do you? And he said, nope. And I said, I'm guilty. Well, he slammed down the gavel and said, well, you're guilty. That'll be $5 and $5 cost. Well, I have laughed about this for years. I'm sure the judge laughed about it for years. And it just kind of reinforced for me the importance of telling the truth. I'd had no idea that was the judge when I told him what happened. But I was guilty.